We're going to jump into contracts today. We're going to put our lawyer hats, our legal hats. We're going to put our terminology of contracts. You guys all deal with contracts on a daily basis. It may not be real estate contracts, but you guys all have contracts. You guys got a cell phone? Cool, you got a contract. And we're going to be talking about some general contract concepts. We're going to talk about contracts itself. We're also going to talk about I think by far the most important document in residential real estate, which is the residential purchase agreement. The content that we're going to be discussing today is only about 18 questions of our final real estate exam, so about 12%. So let's talk into general contract concepts. Contracts, types of contract, classifications, life of contract, terms, acceptance of contracts. So in an easy, your definition, what is a contract? Like, what is a contract? And how would you describe it to me in 1 to 2 sentences? Carla, I'm going to call you out on this. What's a contract?
An agreement between two people.
Yeah, I like it. It's an agreement. It's an agreement to do or not do certain acts, services between 2 separate parties. That is what a contract is. Typically a written document. A written document is typically used for a contract. And there are laws that require certain contracts to be in writing, but there are contracts that are not in writing as well, too. So a contract agreement to do or not do something. So we got 2 types of contracts, and these 2 types of contracts, they're not words that we use frequently, but we want to know the concepts of these contracts. So the first one here on the left is an express contract, also known as an expressed contract. And this is a contract that is words, either oral or in written. But when we think about our lease agreements, that is an express contract. When we think about a contract to purchase a piece of real estate, that is an express contract. If we're talking about representing a buyer, an agreement, if Carla's my buyer, I'm her agent, and we're working together contractually, we are putting that as an expressed agreement. Residential leases would be an example of a express contract. We need to put a circle, star, pin. We need to write this down because as I was taking a few extra quizzes, I came across like 3 times of this question. Oral contracts are not used in real estate unless it's a lease for under a year. I actually didn't know this. If it's a residential lease under a year, it does not need to be in writing. If it's a lease under a year, it does not need to be in writing.
What about month-to-month contract? Oh, it's not. Month-to-month leases.
Does not, per the book and per the questions that I received, if that lease term is less than a year, lease term, but month-to-month does not need to be in writing. So that would fall within that. Weird, right?
Yeah.
We can dive a little further in that, but it's not really needed. I think if you guys go into see a question, and I think I have one of those questions, in this as an example, but if it gives you the option for less than 1 year, that's probably the answer. So leases under 1 year do not need to be in writing. But what is an express contract? An express contract is like a purchase agreement, lease agreement, that's longer than a year, buyer's agreement, listing agreement. Those are all your typical agreements, express contracts. Now let's go implied. An implied contract is a legal substitute for a contract. It's a contract that is not written or spoken. You guys not knowing that you guys do this all the time, I just want you to think of the Olive Garden or Chili's, or think of any sit-down restaurant. I had Olive Garden last week, so that's why I was thinking Olive Garden when I wrote this. But you can fill this in with any sit-down restaurant that you go to. And the reason it's an implied contract is because you go into the restaurant, you tell the hostess how many is in your party, they sit you down, you order. You and the waiter, waitress, you guys don't ever say, hey, I'm going to order this food and I'll pay for my meal at the end. You never do that because it's implied that you sit down, you receive your food, you eat your food, and then they leave the check and then you pay after. That's an implied contract. By your actions of sitting down, eating the food, you agree to pay without actually saying that or confirming that verbally. You do that simply by your actions of eating the food and sitting down. It's implied. That is an implied contract. Expressed is in writing, you're signing it. Implied, no actions, no words, it's all by your actions. So that is an implied contract. The next ones, we got to look at the prefix. The first one is a unilateral. The second one is a bilateral. Uni meaning one, bilateral meaning two. A unilateral is made when one party makes a promise for the act of another. This is a promise for an act, whereas a bilateral is a promise for a promise. So when we talk unilateral, one example that we use is an open listing. We're going to talk open listings a little bit further, but I think a better example of a unilateral is like a reward for a lost item. You know, you see you're on your next door app, or you're walking by on the tree that says reward for cat. You're not bound to find that cat. There's a $100 reward for this cat, right? You're not bound to find this cat. But if you do, they will give you $100. They'll give you the reward, whatever the reward is. That is a unilateral. It's one-sided. One side is not obligated. Whereas a bilateral, this is a two ways. Most real estate contracts, I promise to give you money. You promise to give me title of your property. Employment contract, you promise to give me money. I promise to do the actions of the duties of the job. Rental contract, I promise to give you some money, and you promise to let me occupy your residence. Two ways, promise for a promise. Unilateral is promise for an act. We've got to know this. Important. Uni, one. Bilateral, two. Promise for a promise for an act. Keep that in our minds. See, a lot of the questions that you guys get on your practice exams, you're never going to get this like, what is a unilateral contract? No, it's going to give you some situation, and you're just going to have to read the question, read the answers, and make the best guess. So we have to know this concept of what uni, bilateral, but that vocabulary of that prefix is important to know. All right, let's go classifications. Classifications. So a valid contract. A valid contract is binding and it is enforceable. It is legal. It is correct. It can be upheld, right? These valid contracts have four essential elements: consent, capacity, consideration, and lawful object. Four things: consent, capacity, consideration, and lawful object. How do we remember all four? We got to remember the acronym Coca-Cola. As I've always said, anytime there's an acronym or some type of mechanism to memorize it, it's one of those things that I can almost guarantee you it's going to be some form or another on your final real estate exam. Coca-Cola is what we're memorizing here. And the reason why Coca-Cola: consent, capacity, consideration, and lawful object. And these are for a valid contract, what makes it binding and enforceable? It's these four concepts: consent, capacity, consideration, lawful object. So let's talk about consent. We need consent. We need agreement from both parties. Both the offer and acceptance must be genuine and real. It has to be. And this does not occur when there's fraud involved, when there's a mutual mistake. And a mutual mistake exists when both parties are mistaken as to the matter of the agreement. I mean, both parties didn't realize it, so that agreement isn't enforceable. Duress, can't threaten somebody. Menace, a threat to commit duress. Can't hold a gun to Carla's head and be like, Carla, sign this agreement or else. The agreement will not be enforceable or valid. Cannot. Undue influence. This exists when a person in position of authority, such as a broker, uses the authority to an unfair advantage. This doesn't occur. Consent does not occur when it's one of these. And these are all bad things. So there has to be consent. To make that agreement valid and enforceable, there has to be consent. There also has to be capacity. They must be of sound mind. and in legal age. What is the legal age to enter into a contract, Carla?
18 years.
18 years old. Does anybody know why it's 18 years old?
Is that
You're
like a
considered
legal-
an adult when you're
Adult,
legally
yeah.
an adult.
I was hoping somebody had like a fun fact about why it was 18 years old. I'm sure if I Googled that right now, I'll probably find some video, like 6-minute video on YouTube on an explanation of why 18 years old is the consent. But I think for the next class, I'll have that ready for everybody. Why is 18 years old? Like, to be of sound mind, mental capacity, and of legal age. It does not occur when cannot have capacity when you're any one of these. Minors under 18 years of old age cannot enter into a contract unless they are emancipated by court, emancipated by marriage, emancipated by military enlistment. So minors cannot enter a contract. Incompetence, a person of unsound mind cannot enter into a contract. I think this is the one that has came into my real estate world several times, is when I hear the word dementia. And we have a seller who is early onset dementia, and the title representatives, the escrow, everybody really gets weirded out because they want to make sure that this seller knows what they are actually doing. Yes, Maria.
Oh, I was looking up your question, and the answer was what's being said about 18 is that if people were 18 years old and they were allowed to enter the armed forces, they were old enough to go to war, then why could they not enter contracts to make choices for themselves?
Well, you guys learn something new every day. I learn something new. So if you can go to war, you should
buy
be
a
able
house.
to. Yeah, you can enter war. You can go enter a legal contract. Thank you for looking that up, Maria. I appreciate that. Nice. And it makes sense though. Definitely makes sense. Dementia is like one that escrow and real estate agents, everybody should be extra cautious on this one. The last thing you want is the family member to come back and say, hey, they didn't know that they were selling their property. So incompetent person to be judge of unsound mind. The capacity is not there, will make your contract not valid. And then convicts, persons serving terms of imprisonment may convey property with the approval of the Department of Corrections, and their civil rights are lost during the jail term. So remember, it has to have capacity, have to be legal. If there any one of these, contract's not going to be valid. Consideration is anything of legal value that is offered in exchange by one party for something of value of another property. Common forms, money, a promise, anything of value. Consideration is going to be part of that contract. And then the LA part, the lawful object, it has to be something lawful. You can't make a contract for something that is illegal, like a substance that is illegal. I'm going to write this contract for you. Carla, you and I are going to generate this contract for $1 million for an illegal substance. Object has to be lawful. Personal property, maybe either written or oral, except for one. Leases, 1 year or less, except for leases of 1 year or less. So let's talk about the life of a contract. At the beginning, middle, and end. And the contract, when it comes to contract, there are fancy words. The first one is a negotiation period. This is the creation of a contract. So I want you guys to consider that you are buying a property with me today. You guys are buyers and you saw a property that you absolutely love, right? We are going to write an offer together. I'm going to write an offer as your real estate agent, and we're going to submit that over to the listing side. That is called the negotiation period. This is the creation of a contract. This is the negotiation time. We're going to imagine Carla is the seller. I am your agent. All of you guys are the buyers. This is called the negotiation period. Remember, this is the life of an actual contract, right? So buyer and seller discuss the possibility of a contract. If there's mutual interest, offers are made back and forth. Those are called counter offers. Okay. So let's assume you guys are the buyers and our offer is accepted. Carla agrees to sell the property to you guys for $500,000. All right. It's going to be the performance period. This is the performance. So now we have an agreement. We have an agreement that says, I want to buy your house. You agree to sell my house. We're going to close in 30 days. After offer acceptance and communication of acceptance, the contract is now valid and executory. I can't even say this word, executory. If we were to call this is the escrow period. This is the escrow period of the parties. Like buyers are working on getting on financing, sellers are working on clearing title. If our transaction is for 30 days, this would be day 2 to day 30. This is the executory phase of this contract. And then when we close escrow, that is the completion phase. Negotiate, we agree to perform, we're doing our work, and we're going to close. We can look at it like this in the more simpler terms. Buyer submits an offer and is negotiating with the seller. A buyer and the seller have now agreed. That's the performance stage. We have the executory stage. This is the escrow period. Buyers are doing inspections, loans being processed, paperwork's being signed, nerves are rattling for everybody. And then the finalize when the contract ends, that is the close of escrow. Beginning, middle portion, and end. Negotiation, performance, executory, completion. Let's jump into some terms. Terms of the contract. Executed contract. This is one that has either been discharged or performed. Executed can also mean that all appropriate parties have signed an agreement. I often use this, we have a fully executed contract. When a buyer and a seller both sign the agreement to move forward, that's an executed contract. The executory escrow period. That's the part when everyone's doing their what they need to do to facilitate this sale. Inspections, loan, it's that middle period. More terms. We have an offer. Carla makes an offer to Shantae's house to buy her property. We have the offeror, which is the buyer, person making the offer, and the offeree, which is the person receiving the offer. Super important concept of your real estate exam and just real estate in general. It's going to be the or-e rule. Or-e-e rule. This is one that of the 18 questions that you might get, it's going to have to deal with the or-e-e rule. And this is one of those, we need to know it. You're going to see this throughout your entire books and courses, but the or-e-e rule is a quick rule to determine who gives and who receives, because you'll often see grantor and grantee. You'll see leaseor, leasee, vendor, vendee, optionor, optionee, trustor and trustee, mortgagor, mortgagee, offeror, offeree, or and the ease. The or is the person who gives, conveys, sells. Carla, the buyer, is giving an offer to the seller, which would be known as the offeree. And the offeree, associated words with anybody who receives, receive, purchase, acquire, or is the give, convey, sell. The landlord, the leaseor leases a property to a leasee. The seller, also known as the grantor, conveys the property, gives the property to a buyer, which would be the grantee. They're the one receiving it. The buyer gives an offer to the seller. Or an E, or E rule. Yeah, when we get into, we can get super confusing when we get into counter offer stage because then they reverse. But just a general rule of thumb, or gives, EE receives. More terms. More terms. Communication. Offeree communicates the offer to the offeror their acceptance. Carla, who's the offeree?
The seller.
There you go. The seller communicates to the buyer their acceptance. Oh yeah, I have it written down at the bottom.
But I
Oh,
didn't
fair.
see it. I didn't see it. I swear. I didn't see it.
Communication is super important, especially in negotiations. Like the other party's got to be notified. Yeah. Void. No contract exists. It's unenforceable and voidable. A contract that's together, but if there's fraud, undue influence, if that contract was forced upon somebody and it can be proven, that could be a voidable contract. Communication void, voidable, or contract language. Enforceable can be enforced by a court of law. And then unenforceable due to the status of the contract or a reason unknown, a contract can be found unenforceable. Undue influence, force them upon. When it comes to contracts can be enforceable or unenforceable. Acceptance. We're talking negotiations, we're talking contracts. We have to communicate that we accept somebody's offer. And that's why one of the terms that says is silence cannot be interpreted as acceptance of an offer, because an acceptance must be communicated. We do, if we write an offer on Carla's property and she's the seller and you guys are the buyers, Carla has to let us know that she accepts our terms. She can't just assume, we can't just, not say anything. We have to communicate that Carla is accepting our offer. Acceptance must be in the manner specified in the offer. And any of our purchase agreements, any of our contracts, all state that acceptance must be in writing. It has to be on a specific form in writing, given to the other party. Because once that other party receives it, that's day zero. That is the acceptance day. That is the day of acceptance. The next day is day one. Then we also have counteroffers. We'll talk about counteroffers shortly here. But a counteroffer is a revised offer to our original offer. We offer Carla $500,000 to buy our property. She disagrees with that price and issues us a counteroffer of $600,000. Like it's 2021 in real estate. That's how it happened back then. All right, a contract based on an illegal consideration is based on an illegal consideration. A contract based on an illegal
D.
We got one guess for
D,
D.
void.
But why is it? It's definitely not A because it's not a valid one. Is it voidable? It's not enforceable. It's void because it's illegal. Yeah, there we go. Nice job. Look at that. And in the handout, guys, at the far bottom of the handout are all the answers. Even on when you click on my handout with the slides, like all the answers are in the back too. All right, an agreement to transfer real property will be binding on both the buyer and seller if it. Agreement to transfer real property will be binding on both the buyer and seller if it.
C.
Is typed, is recorded, definitely not D. Contains an offer and acceptance, or contains an acknowledgement.
C.
We got one C. We got a guess of C.
B.
We got a B. Let's see what it is. Oh, I'm back. It's B. There must be some type of offer. There has to be an offer and acceptance by the parties for the contract to be binding. It's got to be. So the acknowledgement is just acknowledging it, but the answer to B is a better answer because it has the offer and acceptance.
Makes sense.
Tricky questions.
Mhm.
Tricky questions. If a person obtains a contract through duress, that contract is through duress.
A.
They obtained the contract though, and with the A, no, I'm good with your answer. So they obtained the contract, but it was through duress. Is it automatically void? Is it valid? Is it unenforceable? Or is it voidable? And it is actually voidable. Examples of voidable contracts include contracts signed under duress, because the way that they word the question, if a contract obtains, the obtains part, they obtain the contract, but through duress, if that client moves forward with it, they still can come back. It's still voidable. And avoidable and unenforceable, they both play in that same like.
I was gonna
Which one
say
is
D.
it?
Yeah, I was gonna say
Yeah.
D.
Unenforceable. They both that very,
Tricky.
very close. All the following essentials. All the following are essentials of each and every contract, except I'm going to give you guys a hint. Think of Coca-Cola real quick. Think of Coca-Cola.
A.
Except A. I think you're correct. Yeah, you are correct. Mutual consent, that's the CO. Capable parties, that's the CA. And the last part, LA. All of the essentials are each in every contract except proper writing. Must have the four: mutual consent, lawful object, capable parties, and consideration. Coca-Cola, do recall that. Do remember that. Let's go contracts. Let's go listing agreements. Listing agreement is a contract to hire a real estate agent to facilitate the sale of a principal's property. All real estate listings must be in writing to collect a commission. Absolutely. The 5-page residential listing agreement is 5 pages. It does explain what the compensation will be. It'll also just have some verbiage on there that says that we're going to post pictures of your property on the internet. It's going to say we're going to put a lockbox. It's going to tell the seller specifically what their rights are and what they need to do and what the responsibility are as a seller when selling a property. And there are a couple different types of listing agreements. There's not just one. And we do want to know the different types of listing agreements here. And the first one and the most common is what we call an exclusive authorization and right to sell listing. Our brokerage, this is the only type that we take. This is the only type of listing agreement that I allow my agents to take. And this one here, again, is most common, eliminates all procuring causes. This is a bilateral contract. And the key part at the bottom, commission is owed regardless of who procures the buyer, even the seller. So if I'm selling Carla's property, we put Carla's property on the market, and then Carla's friend's cousin's neighbor's sister buys the property, she still owes the commission, even though she found the buyer. No matter what, I'm still owed the commission. Our listing brokerage is still owed the commission. And that's where, like, that is, you're paying the fees, Carla, no matter what, if you sell, where the other two give an option. So the first one is an exclusive listing seller reserve agency. It's this word right here, exclusive agency listing. Seller reserves the right not to pay a commission if the seller procures their own buyer. So if we use that same example, Carla hires me, Ben Gomez, Nationwide Real Estate, to sell, market, and sell her property. But instead, we sign a exclusive agency. I only get paid. I, as the listing broker, only get paid if I find the buyer. If she finds the buyer, if her neighbor approaches her, or friend's cousin, baby sister's friend, sister, if the seller brings, she doesn't owe me a commission. Only if our agency, our broker, procures the buyer. This one, doesn't matter who brings it, I get paid. If the seller brings it, she gets paid. The third one, slight difference. This is an open listing. This is where the seller can list it with multiple brokers. Whoever brings the first buyer that she accepts collects a commission. This is kind of like that for sale sign. This is a unilateral. This is kind of like that reward. Instead of a picture of a cat, it's a picture of a house. Sell my house and you receive $10,000. So she can list it with multiple brokers. Multiple brokers, whoever brings her a buyer, she pays. What happens if with this open listing, Carla, the seller, finds her own buyer? Does she owe anybody a commission? She doesn't. It's open. Exclusive authorization and right to sell listing. You're going to pay me no matter what. Only if I bring, you're listing it only with me. Only if I bring the buyer. An open listing, anybody can. These can be added in conjunction with any of these three. We have something called a net listing and an option listing. Net listing and option listing. Net listing is a negotiation threshold. So using the same example, Carla, she's selling her property. Carla says to me, hey, as long as I make 500,000, as long as I walk away with 500,000, anything over that, Ben, you keep. That's not the worst thing ever, but not often. This is not often used. And a net listing is focusing on the net, the profit. So if I sell Carla's property for 800,000 and anything over 500,000, I get to keep. So if I'm profiting 300,000, it's well worth it. If I were to do this net listing with Carla and the proceeds are only 501,000, how much of that do I get to keep? 1,000. That's it.
Yeah.
So anything over that negotiated threshold, that's what a net listing is. An option listing, option to buy a property at a predetermined price. So broker B agrees to buy the property from the seller 500,000 if the home doesn't sell in 90 days. The starting price will be 600,000. Not really an example, but every time I hear option listing, what comes to my mind is those billboards or banners that say guaranteed to sell your home or we'll buy it. Has anybody ever seen that type of advertising by a real estate agent? You say, oh, guaranteed to sell or we'll buy it. Yeah, of course you'll buy it, but not at that price that you are listing it for. Any property is going to sell if it's 75% off. Of course you will, but I'm sure there's some type of written agreement for this. That would be an option listing. And this is an option listing is where a broker, real estate agent agrees to buy a property for a predetermined price if it doesn't sell during said period. Anybody recently buy a property here? Nobody? Maybe?
2 years ago.
2 years ago. I say you bought a property 2 years ago. Cool. Thank you.
Yeah.
When you,
Mhm.
did you work with a real estate agent?
No,
How'd you buy
it's actually a new track home.
Oh,
So when we purchased the property, I mean, of course, there's a waiting list and so, and we were interested in the area. And when we got to the area, we found a home that was for sale without the new sale home seller. And I guess we weren't really that interested in it. And then we went into the office and she said there was a home that fell out of escrow. So we got interested and went into that home and looked at it, and we were interested and we put an offer.
all right. Well, that's not going to fall in line with my example here, but
Okay.
appreciate you sharing on that one though. But
Okay.
yeah, that happens, you can work
Sorry.
with the builder, go through, no, it's all good. Working with real estate agents today, there should be a buyer representation agreement. So if you guys wanted to buy a home and I'm your agent, I do put together an agreement just saying that we're working with each other. That's all it is, that I'm representing you. I mean, you exclusively as your agent. I have your best interest. It could be exclusive or non-exclusive. And these agreements also do have some compensation agreements too that say, if you go into an open house and you work with them instead of me, you may be owing me a commission as well too. But I think working relationships should definitely have some type of an agreement. This one here isn't used a lot. Sadly. I always train my agents to use it. But there are agreements between buyers and buyers agents, just like there is for sellers and listing agents. I feel like we went through terms. We got to fix that. So let's go terms. So real estate contract does contain a real estate contract is going to contain some terms. It's going to contain the price. It's going to contain some specific financing terms. Maybe they're not doing financing. If they're doing all cash, they will indicate that they're doing all cash. And then it's also going to contain an accurate description of the property. Now, this is a concept that we have to know. An illusory contract. I can never pronounce this correctly. An illusory contract. And what an illusory contract is one in which the terms are not definite and certain. Therefore, the contract is unenforceable. I don't know about you guys. When I look at illusory, it looks like illusion. That's kind of what the word that pops into my mind, and it's an illusion. If you think of an illusion, a magician, it's kind of like mysterious, unknown. An illusory contract could be this: an agent did not put an ending date to his listing agreement, therefore the listing agreement is invalid. This is an illusory contract. Our contracts need to be full and complete, and they need to have ending times. They need to have a contract. It cannot be indefinite. They cannot be forever. So if Shantae wants to sell her property, I can't put an agreement together that's for the life of her ownership that I'm going to be the agent. Can't be that. Another example of illusory contract too, and this is just another way, you got a buyer who writes an offer for a property. The seller offers a counter offer. The buyer offers a counter offer. The seller issues another counter offer. The buyer issues a third counter offer. The seller offers another counter. Like when you get to too many contracts and counter offers, it could be confusing to put the chain together. If there's too many times that it goes back and forth and it is uncertain and indefinite, they could deem that unenforceable. Another way a contract could be deemed as an illusory contract is if people are scanning it, terrible scans. You can't read the text, can't read the verbiage. It may be deemed unenforceable because it was scanned too many times and the content's illegible. Another thing to think about in illusory contracts, a contract which one party has no real obligation to perform. Question marks, illusory, illusion. That's what we're thinking of when we hear illusory contract. Another part on the language of contracts, novation. Novation, I don't know. I want to say it looks like new, but that's what it is. Novation is a substitution of a new contract for an old one. Old contract for a new contract. Novation, new, illusory, illusion. Put those two words together. Just say them multiple times. Keep that in the back of your head. So if you get a question on your exam that mentions novation, you're going to go, oh, novation. Oh, yeah, like new contract. Illusory, illusion. Question mark should pop up. Let's talk about terminating. Let's talk about terminating an offer. The offer can terminate upon the occurrence of one of these things. Number one is a lapse of time. Let's say Darlene is making an offer today to Carla. Carla's the seller, Darlene's the buyer. Today, Saturday, February 25th. Per our contracts, the offer expires in 3 days. 3 calendar days. It doesn't say business days, it says calendar days. Actually, it doesn't say calendar, it just says 3 days. In 3 days, that offer is technically lapsed, it's expired. So the termination of any offer could be lapse of time. Contracts again, 3 days. An offer can be terminated also by communication of revocation. Another word for revocation is reject. Communication of rejection. Offer can be terminated by the offeror at any time before the offeree has communicated acceptance. So if Darlene writes an offer to Carla, the seller, and in one day Darlene changes her mind, I can tell the seller, hey seller, sorry, my buyer changed their mind. We're going to withdraw our offer. Communication. Another way an offer can be terminated is failure to fulfill a condition. All conditions must be completed in prescribed manner. When you guys are writing offers for a property, if Darlene is writing an offer to Carla, the seller, part of that contract, and if Darlene is getting financing, or even if she's paying cash, part of the contract does require Darlene, the buyer, to provide proof that she either has the funds or the funds for the down payment. If that condition isn't fulfilled, if she fails to fulfill that condition, that offer is no good no more. We must fulfill all the conditions as agreed upon in the contract. Carla, who's the offeree? Offeree rejects or makes a counteroffer?
Offeree is the buyer,
Or
the seller.
the seller, yeah, the seller.
I
So
get
the
so
buyer,
confused on those. I really do.
that's okay. Just continue playing around with that. Offer
Okay.
or, offer E, or in E. So rejection. So buyer, the offeror makes an offer. The offeree, the seller rejects and makes a counteroffer or just rejects it in general. That could be the termination of an offer. Death or insanity. If one person dies, if the buyer makes an offer, then dies or goes insane, yeah, that offer's no good no more. And then the illegality of the purpose, if it's deemed illegal, if any condition or purpose on the contract it could be voided. So these can all be terminating offers. None of the following automatically terminates an offer to buy real estate except none of the following automatically terminates an offer except reject the offer, revocation of the offer by the offeree would not be that, because when we talk revocation, that is they want to revoke the offer by the offeree. It would not be the offeree, it would be the offeror. They mix up the wording. They should have put offeror there. The offeror, remember, that's the buyer. They're revoking their offer. So it wouldn't be by the seller. It would be by the buyer. So this is an incorrect statement. An inquiry by the seller as to whether the buyer will accept different terms. It doesn't automatically terminate an offer. Rejection of the offer by the offeror. It's not the offeror. It's not the buyer receiving the offer. Rejection of the offer by the offeree. Rejection of the offer by the seller. It's D. It's D. You guys confused on the ors and es?
Oh.
I
Totally
was
fine.
guessing D the whole time, and I put myself on mute, and I was like, why is it easier for me? But yeah, I
It's,
had guessed D.
Cool. Yeah. And totally get it. If you're not getting these, like, don't even stress. Like, we want to review these notes. We want to review these notes. It doesn't have to be later on today. It doesn't have to be tomorrow. As you get closer to your exam, we're looking through this to try to get a better understanding of like why was it that one? The wording is tricky. It is. So you have the concepts. Somebody raise your hand. I thought it popped up. No.
I did, Darlene. In fact,
Okay.
because I know you said that later on we'll probably understand a little bit more, because I'm very confused on that last question as well, why it wouldn't be B, because the way that I read the question is what automatically terminates an offer, and B is just saying that it's an inquiry on whether the offer will be accepted under different terms, but nothing has actually changed to actually terminate, for termination. It's more of an inquiry.
Yeah, it's an
So
inquiry.
can
It's
you
like,
explain
hey,
that a little bit more?
Sure.
Because if we're gonna get more questions like this, that's how my brain was thinking.
an inquiry by the offeree as to whether an inquiry by the buyer as to whether inquiry by the seller as to whether the buyer will accept different terms. The part that makes B incorrect and why it makes it not automatic is because it's just an inquiry. It is a quick text. It's a phone call. Hey, Darlene, offer by the seller. Hey, Darlene, do you think your buyer might take a different term? It doesn't automatically reject it. It's just a conversation between agents or the parties just discussing if they'll consider different terms.
Oh, you know what? I did read that question wrong because it's saying like none of these will terminate except for one will terminate. And I read it the opposite.
It's darn it.
Okay, there's only like one that won't terminate the contract. So sorry. I totally read that and
Nope.
computed it wrong.
It's always the except for, like those ones are definitely tougher because that would mean that only one of them is none of the following automatically except that one. Yeah. Rejection of the offer. Rejection of the offer by the seller. I wish I would just say seller. Make more sense that way.
Really do.
The duration of a listing agreement is
B
90 days. Okay.
or A? I'm not sure.
And it
Maybe
be,
A. Maybe it's C. Maybe it's D. Okay. The answer is actually A. Whatever is agreed upon for both. It cannot be definite and forever. Most listing contracts between a seller and an agent are typically for 6 months. I'll tell you guys, I have no interest in listing your property for 6 months. I want to be done in 60 days. But listing contracts, depending on the market, are typically 6 months. A short-term contract would be 90 days, and 3 months is exactly the same. If you want me to sell your piece of land in the middle of nowhere, I'm probably going to take a contract for a year or 2 years because it takes longer to sell a vacant parcel of land. But a listing agreement can be whatever's negotiated between the broker, the agent, and the seller. It could be as long as it's agreed upon. That's the key part. It can be for any duration as long as it's agreed upon by both parties. There's a beginning and there's an end date. When part of an agreement is changed or an agreement is replaced by a new one, keyword new one, I said it earlier, it is a
C,
C.
duration.
That's a softball question for you guys. Said it earlier. Novation, new, illusory, illusion. New contract, old contract for a new contract. What listing requires an owner to pay a commission even though they sell the property themselves? Themselves? Should it be selves or self? So the owner sells the property themselves. Which one? What type of listing agreement was it? Do we recall?
I
Either
don't
A
know.
or
It's
D.
A or D.
A
Yeah,
or
A
D.
It's A or D. Remember, B is a net listing. That's all like a threshold. Like anything over 500,000, you get to keep, agent. Open listing, that one is anybody who brings me a buyer, anybody, any broker, I'll pay the commission to them. A, exclusive agency. Only that broker. If that broker brings that person, that seller, an offer, then they pay a commission. The exclusive right to sell is the one that most common. That's the only one that we take because it doesn't matter if the seller finds their own buyer. It doesn't matter if it's the seller's brother who buys the property. Doesn't matter if the seller's tenant buys a property. If we have an exclusive right to sell listing, you're still owing me a full commission. It's the only one we take. Exclusive right to sell. By far the most important contract, I think, as a buyer's agent and as a listing agent, is the residential purchase agreement. And we're talking residential. We're not talking commercial. We're talking contract terminology, purchase options, advance fee. We're talking about if you bought a residential property in the last, I don't know, 50 years, you signed a residential purchase agreement. If you bought a property 50 years, this agreement was probably 1 page. It's 16 pages now. When I started real estate 13 years ago, it was like 9 pages. They change it every 2 years. They had a big change back in 2022. No, 2020. Yeah, 2020. No, 2021. In December 2021, it went from like 13 pages to 16 pages. The residential purchase agreement is super important, and it is the main document we use to facilitate purchases, offers for 1 to 4 units. In your handout, I put in the handout, I did put a link to view the actual purchase agreement as of today. 16 pages. If you want to bore yourself, go right ahead. But actually, it has all the information that are negotiated between a buyer and a seller. I do a ton of training on this one, and I do a ton of training on this because when I have issues on transactions, actually like 90% of the questions that I get from agents, the answers can be found in this agreement. The problem with this agreement is that it's size 4 font, it's 16 pages, and it's super intimidating. Out of 100 buyers, how many buyers do you think would actually read all 16 pages?
None.
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 And I like the people who say, well, 1 or 2 or 50. No, nobody reads it. If you guys bought a property in the last 10 years, I can guarantee you didn't read it either. And if you did, you didn't understand it. The agreement itself is very thorough. Lawyers put this together from the California Association of Realtors. It's very specific. It's very concise. It has all the details. It is fill in the blank. But what do we need to know for our final real estate exam? What we need to know is when using pre-printed forms like this, handwritten parts will have control over the pre-printed parts, and all corrections must be initialed. Think of your checks, the checks that you write. What happens if you spell a name wrong or put in the wrong date? What do you guys have to do on your personal checks that you write? Cross it out.
Correct
and then
an
what?
initial.
Yeah,
An
cross it
initial.
out initial.
Same exact thing on this. These pre-printed forms are all pre-printed. So if you do cross anything out or handwrite on these contracts, make sure you got to initial, and those handwritten parts will supersede, will have control over the pre-written parts. So like I said, 16 pages. Take a glance at it, everybody. And if you have questions on that, just shoot me a call, shoot me a message, or I'll be happy to discuss it with you. But the one that I included in your handout, that is the most up-to-date version of the residential purchase agreement. As a buyer's agent, no buyers read this. You as an agent need to explain this document to your client and make them feel comfortable about what they're signing. You as a listing agent need to know this contract too and how to read it, because you don't want your seller to enter into an agreement where they didn't know that they were giving up their fridge and their washer and dryer, and you didn't realize that you had your seller agree to pay for termite repairs. So as a listing agent, you need to know this document. As a buyer's agent, you need to know this document. I can't put any bit more emphasis on this, but yeah, you very much need to know this document. But that purchase agreement, handwritten parts, that's what you need to know. All of our purchase agreements have something called a deposit. A deposit is typically 1% of the sales price. So if you're writing an offer in a $500,000 piece of property, typically an earnest money deposit, also known as a EMD, earnest money deposit, good GFD, good faith deposit, that amount is collected upon acceptance. That money is placed in escrow, and that is 3 business days after acceptance, or the seller may cancel. To provide a quick example, Darlene, you're going to buy a property. Congratulations. Your offer was accepted by Shantae today. Yay, congratulations. You have 3 business days to put your deposit into escrow. And if you don't, Shantae can cancel on you and move on to the next buyer. That's what can happen. No, she doesn't want to, she wants to still move forward. Then you got to get your deposit to escrow. That's what you got to do. Covenant is a promise between parties, promise between parties to a contract. This language is used in the purchase agreement, and that's what a contract is. It's a promise. It says, "Hey, I promise to do this within this time frame. I promise to provide you this amount of money, and I promise to close within a period of time." Talk about contingency. What happens to the deposit if the buyer bails after paying the deposit? That's a very good question, Carmen. What happens to the deposit if a buyer bails after? And when you say bails, like, you mean like they just ghost us, they don't ever show up again, or do they cancel because they don't want to? They got cold feet. They don't want to buy. They change their mind, right? So what I always tell my agents, that there is no clause in the contract that says. There's no mind-changing clause in the contract. There is no clause that says, I got cold feet, I got buyer's remorse, I don't want to buy the property anymore. You cannot cancel for that reason. However, you do have something called contingencies. Contingencies, conditions are subject to. Now, these are provisions in a deposit receipt, which all parties are released from any obligation in the event that someone stated occurrence fails to materialize. So to not speak lawyer talk here, as a buyer has a certain period of time after opening escrow to where they can cancel. And that typical time frame is 17 days. So I want you guys all to imagine today you are buying Shantae's property. Shantae is accepted your offer, you're buying the property. What are some things that you as a buyer might want to do for this property that you're buying? What are some things that you might want to do in the next 17 days after today? Darlene, you're buying a property. What do you want to do? Anything you want to check out?
I want to get an inspection.
Want to
The
get an
house.
inspection? Absolutely. That is they call it the investigation contingency, but that is absolutely something that you're able to do in the 17 days. If that inspection goes poorly and you don't want to buy the property anymore, yes, you can cancel, since that's part of a contingency, and you will get your deposit back. So going back to Carmen's question, what happens to the deposit if the buyer pays after paying the deposit? The buyer is entitled to their deposit back if they're within that time frame. So as long as you're within the 17 days, or maybe you lose your job, you were originally planning to get a loan and then you lose your job a week into escrow. Now you can't get a mortgage loan anymore. Yeah, you would be entitled to your deposit back because you can't fulfill the rest of the sale. Maybe you drive by on a Friday night and you don't like the crowd that's hanging by, or maybe you start walking up and down the street and almost get beat up. True story, actually. One of my buyers canceled because they drove by on a Friday night and they almost got in a fight with one of the neighbors. So they didn't want to buy. And yes, sometimes you can lose your deposit. As Fatin wrote in the chat, sometimes you can lose your deposit. Absolutely. For new homes, new homes have slightly different rules. I've mentioned a few times 17 days. That 17 days can be shortened if agreed upon. But if you are day 30, about to close on Monday, and you change your mind, you might lose your deposit. The seller has a right to fight to keep your deposit. They can just say, nope, you had your time frame. You signed off all your rights, and we're going to keep your deposit. That's probably one of the top 3 disputes that we have. Yeah. New homes, you know, if you're putting a reservation on a home, it could be a non-refundable. Cool. Awesome. But seriously, I can talk like an hour on contingencies and timeframes and what if scenarios. But if you have questions on it, throw that in the chat. I'd be happy to discuss that. So purchase agreement, someone writes an offer, the seller makes a counter offer. That is a form that is used to in the negotiation process. And this is what that timetable looks like. A buyer makes an offer to a seller to buy property using a residential purchase agreement. The seller can either accept the buyer's terms, they can make a counter offer, or they can just flat out reject it. No seller is required to make a counter offer. So let's just say that the seller makes a counter offer. The buyer can accept the seller's counter offer, make a counter offer, or just withdraw their offer. And so on and so on. So Jan offers to buy David's property for $500,000, close in 30 days, and will complete all investigations in 17 days. David reviews the offer and agrees to the terms, but he wants a price of $520,000. Jan issues a counter offer price of $510,000. David accepts, and all the negotiations are now complete. Everything's in writing. It's all in the paperwork. It's all in the process. It's all the stuff I deal with on a daily basis, just helping the agents upload documents, get them signed, and go through that negotiation process. Can you negotiate verbally? Carla, can we negotiate verbally? Yeah, we can. But once you're
Yes.
done with those verbal negotiations, put it in writing.
Mm.
Absolutely can. As the representative of my client and you're a representative of your client, we can have a conversation, come agree upon terms. We can do it all by phone. But once we complete those negotiations and finalize those terms, put that in writing. Hey, you guys ever heard of a lease to own or rent to own programs?
Yep.
Yeah, they're there. And this is what we call purchase options. An option is a right to purchase a property upon specified terms within a specified period of time, which is granted for an exchange of money. And when we talk lease to own option contracts, there's the option or, there's the option E, there's an option fee, lease to own. The most common one, now one that I always get from tenants is, hey, is this a lease to own? You know, where a portion of my payment goes to my down payment. That's not a real rent to own. No owner's just going to give you their property just because you made payments for a year or two. We particularly have a program that allows individuals, you know, maybe you get paid all cash. You don't file taxes. Maybe your income's not provable. If that's the case, it's difficult to get a mortgage loan. But we have this investment firm. They specialize in lease to own, rent to own programs. But what they require is 10% investment. So let's say you can't report your income, you don't do your taxes. You know, you put 10% down. They will provide you with a lease agreement, and you'll pay them X amount of dollars. And if you sell the property 3 years down the line, well, you get to keep the profit as long as they get their payment back. Or 3 years down the line, you're able to get a mortgage loan. You can just pay them off and the property's yours. So lease to own, purchase options, that is a form of a purchase contract that you can get. So when it comes to advance fee, so if you ever see the word advance fee, what I want you guys to know is, you guys as real estate agents, if you guys ever collect money, if Carla's my client and Carla gives me money, I have a long list of steps that I have to do for the Department of Real Estate. So if Carla is selling her property, and Carla, we're going to sell your property and we're going to stage your home. Cool?
Yeah.
All right, we're going to blow out all your furniture. We're going to stage your home, but the staging is going to cost $2,000 a month. And let's say Carla, the seller, agrees to pay for that. If Carla pays me, gives me the money, writes me a check out to my name, or gives me cash, I have to go through a process and report that to the DRE, the Department of Real Estate, to go through my broker, receive that money. Like, that is such a pain. An easier way to facilitate this transaction is simple. I just have her pay the staging company directly. If you guys touch money, there is a whole process. So that's what we talk about in advance fee. Like, when we talk advance fee, you guys never, ever, ever want to collect any money, touch any money at all as real estate agents. An advance fee equals long, lengthy process of reporting it to the DRE. You don't want to do it. But think about that if you ever get a question about advance fee. And let's talk about discharging of a contract. And when we say discharge, we're talking about the completion of a contract. So when a contract is fully performed, everybody has done their part. It's the full performance, discharge of the contract, it'll terminate. I think the best example is when I see full, substantial, partial, or when I see these two, substantial, I really think more of like a construction. So let's imagine, so let me explain it this way. Substantial performance, what we're referring to here is Carla's got a house, and let's imagine I'm not a real estate agent, I'm a contractor. I'm a general contractor, right? And I'm building a patio cover for Carla. So Carla and I, me the contractor, Carla the owner, we put together an agreement that says she's going to pay me $2,000 to build this patio cover. And let's just say I built the patio cover and I was supposed to paint it. It's almost done. There's just the last few finishing touches that that I haven't completed yet. The majority, the substantial part of that contract has been completed. The contract could terminate with the agreement of both parties. So maybe I'm calling on Carla, hey, I want to get paid. I didn't finish the wood. I didn't finish painting, but let's say Carla's okay with it and she pays me. Like, the contract's done because substantial performance has been completed. Partial performance is just, let's say I'm halfway done. I didn't finish the last few beams, but Carla, the seller, is okay with me not finishing. Carla, you still going to pay me the full amount? No, maybe she pays me half. Cool, I'll accept that. That's partial performance. Impossibility, you know, let's say you foreclose on the home, Carla, and I can't finish that, and you're going to foreclose on the home. You're not going to owe it anymore, and you're not even the owner anymore. So the impossibility of performance, just not done anymore. The acceptance of the breach, you know, that's, we both agree upon that we're not going to finish that patio cover. Acceptance of, I'm sorry, agreement of parties. That's if we both agree that we're not going to finish it. Acceptance of the breach, that means I disappear, I ghost you. You never ever see me again, and you just say, forget it, that's fine. Operation of the law. It's illegal. It's illegal to build that patio cover. And then breach. Like, I just flat out, I'm not going to finish it. Now, these parts here, not so much. It's just I've always thought of like the full, substantial, partial, all solely based on contractor. I don't really have a good real estate example other than the patio cover and the contractor. So let's talk about a breach. Like, this is one party that just didn't do what they were supposed to. You know, there's a few remedies for this. There's the acceptance of it. There's the unilateral. We want action for dollar damages and possible action for specific performance. So remember, this is a breach. This is a breach of contract. We had two parties said they were going to do something and then they didn't do it. So one option is the acceptance. No legal action. Lesson learned. I can't believe they wronged me like that. And I'm just going to move on. I accept it. Unilateral. Uni, there's the prefix, that's the one-sided. The wronged party discloses the wrong and restores everything of value to the offending party. best example for this is the agent tells the buyer the home is in the ABC school district. So maybe the agent says, hey, yeah, it's in the school district. Upon investigation, the home is not. The buyer cancels for this reason. Nothing was wrong. They just moved on. It's like the one-sided. They just cancel the contract. They let them know, like, we apologize. We're sorry about that. And one side just cancels the contract. Let's talk about action for dollar damages. In your contract, in your purchase agreement contract, everyone, there is a clause in there. It's in bold, and it's in bold, and it's in all caps. Think about text messaging etiquette. When someone texts you guys in all caps, what does that mean?
They're yelling at you.
Yeah, they're being rude, number
Mhm.
one. But yeah, I despise all caps. I hate exclamation points too. It's like, why are you yelling at me? We have one agent who always writes in all caps and exclamation, gets on my nerves, but that's just the way he writes. Like, it's just what he does. So occurs when a court suit arbitration for breach requests payment of a fixed contract, must be initialed. So what we're referencing here is this, the liquidated damages agreement. The most amount of money a buyer can, most amount of damages that a seller can retain from a buyer is 3% of the sales price. Let me give you just a better example. Carla, you are buying a property and your deposit is $100,000. You're buying a property for $500,000 and you put a $100,000 deposit. You will not lose. In the event of you losing that, you aren't going to lose $100,000. The most that you can lose is 3% of that price, so $15,000. That is the liquidated damages agreement. That is the penalty that the buyer will pay for the breach of contract. And keep in mind, everybody, this isn't just automatic too. This isn't like, oh, sorry, I'm keeping your money. There's a lot of other steps. But I want you to just remember 3%. 3% of the purchase price. And that is the liquidated damages agreement. And the last one is specific performance. The party causing the breach is, through court action, forced to perform the terms of the contract. Specific performance, you're suing for a specific item. Has anybody, this happened once. And what happened was we were representing the buyer in a transaction. And on day 30, we're going to close the next day. The seller says, we don't want to sell anymore. They just, no specific reason. They just said, you know what, we just don't want to sell anymore. And at that time, the buyer had gone through the loan process. They did their inspections. They put in their 30-day notice. They scheduled their moving. What happens if at the last moment, the seller says, nope, we're not going to sell anymore? This particular seller in this case had no reason. It was just, they were just kind of rude about it. Like, we're not going to sell. We're not moving. We're not doing anything. It went through a good another 2 weeks of just threatening, and we got our mediation team involved. Long story short, we threatened to take this a little bit further, and they ended up just closing and moving on. But going for specific performance, a breach of specific performance, buyer will likely have a remedy for this. So think of that situation, a specific instance, a specific action. Let's talk counter offers. Let's finish up on this. When a counter offer is made, the original offer cannot amend his terms. The offeree becomes the offeror. I like that one. I think it's B. The counter offer is made. The original offer cannot amend his terms. So when a counter offer is made, the original buyer cannot amend his terms. You could, but it's a really complicated process and it's not the proper way to do it. And the reason it's not a proper way to do it is because the seller should counteroffer and then the buyer can make a counteroffer to that counteroffer. The offeree becomes the offeror. So when an offer is made, the offeror is making that to the offeree, which is the buyer's making that to the seller. But when now the seller makes it to the buyer, the roles switch. See, O's and E's, I think it's B. The original offer becomes a unilateral offer. No, it's still bilateral. It is considered partial acceptance of the original offer. Either accept it or you don't. Partial acceptance of the terms. B. In counteroffers, the offeree becomes an offeror. It is a brand new offer. The one making the offer is the offeror, and the one receiving the offer is the offeree. The original offer gets terminated and a new offer gets made. Yeah, the seller now becomes the seller becomes the one offering the new terms. I gotta figure out a better way to explain the offeror and ease because it just confuses the heck out of everybody. I almost want to change it, but that's how the exam is. So the ors and the e's is really got to digest the wording of it and go, all right, which one is which? Or and e. But this one is when a counter offer is made. That is the true statement here, is that offeree, the person receiving it, is now making an offer.
Sorry, I had a quick question. Back on what
Yes.
you were saying on that example, that it was the 30 days and the seller decided to back off. Being that it did pass the 17 days, the buyer still gets their deposit back, right? Because it wasn't their fault that they.
If that buyer just said, oh, well, you don't want to sell anymore? All right, we're going to accept that. But yes, they would very much get their deposit back because they were not the ones in breach.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah, of course. Where are you most likely to find the words time is of the essence? Think about a purchase agreement. I gave you guys one example where they could cancel if they didn't bring it in within that period of time. It is not a listing form. Real estate transfer disclosure statement, it's not that, because that is a document that a seller fills out. It's like an affidavit telling the purchaser about the home. A grant deed is kind of called that the receipt used to prove ownership. We're talking D. We are talking about the receipt of deposit. Time is of the essence. Remember, 3 days. 3 days. 3 business days. I'm sorry. 3 business days is when they got to keep that deposit, or the seller may cancel. The buyer of a home was not informed that the house was on a septic tank system. The buyer has the right to rescind the contract. Okay. Signed a contract and must follow through with their purchase of the property. But they didn't know that it was on a septic, and it seems to be an issue for them. So I like the first one. They have the right to rescind. They can sue the title company for failure to discover the problem. It's not the title company's job to discover that. They can sue the broker for his license. Dang, rude. A, has the right to rescind the contract. Hey, if the buyer finds out in escrow, buyer of the home was not informed that the house was on a septic. It really should say more about what part of the process, but the way that they word the question, the buyer of the home was not informed that the house was on a septic tank system. The buyer, they would have the right to cancel this agreement. If they didn't know this, if they did not know that the home was on a septic, they have the right to rescind the contract. What happens though, everybody, if they find out in escrow that the home was, actually, let me say it like this. What happens if the buyer buying the property finds out that the home was on a septic tank after they close? What happens then? They go back to the seller and say, you didn't tell me? No. What typically happens in that case is, too bad, So sad. Thank you, Carmen. Yeah, it's the buyer's problem. The buyer should have investigated. The buyer has the right to investigate all aspects of the property. They have the right to search Megan's Law, school records, physical inspection. They have the right to test the air. I had a client test the air one time. Test the air, test for lead, test the water. The buyer has all the right to do these investigations within a certain period of time. If they close escrow and they come to the fact and say, you didn't tell me, well, you should have investigated. Using that same example, if the seller told the buyer that it was on a sewer line and not septic, that's a whole different story, because that is that's the wrong disclosure of a material fact. They can go after the seller for that if the seller said it wrong. Steven signs a real estate contract. Most real estate contracts contain pre-printed clauses or spaces for information to be added. In the interpretation of Steven's contract, A, the written parts and the pre-printed parts are given equal consideration. Ooh, written and pre-printed are given equal consideration. I don't think that's it. No changes or amendments to the pre-printed clause permitted by law. Nope, that's not it either, because you can change a pre-printed contract. The written parts take precedence over the pre-printed parts. Okay. The pre-printed parts take precedence over the written parts. I'm going to give you guys a hint, either C or D. It is C. The written parts. You got the pre-printed contract. Any written parts, think of your personal checks. That's what it is. Contracts. Fun stuff. Read your contracts. Read the notes from today. Read the notes. And if it don't make sense, call me. Let's just have a conversation. Stick after. I appreciate you guys. Stay warm, stay dry. Enjoy the rainy weather. Unless you lived in the Pacific Northwest for 30 years, then you're probably not enjoying this that much. But it's just for a couple days. I appreciate you guys. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
you too.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you,
Thank
Ben.
you.
Bye,
Bye.
guys.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.